This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. Tired of not getting a hold of anyone when you have questions about your credit card? With 24/7 live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. This week, we're connecting the dots between student journalists, campus protests, and the way our leaders remember history. Now, how are these things connected? Well, we're going to find out with two student journalists, Shaanth Nanguneri, an undergraduate reporter at the University of California, Los Angeles, and Claire Davenport, a graduate reporter at Columbia University in New York. Shaanth, Claire, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thank you so much, Brittany.
Thank you for having us.
To jump right in, for weeks, pro-Palestinian protests have been popping up on college campuses around the world. By some counts, there are at least 90 college campuses with students camped out or just recently had students camped out, calling for their administrations to divest their ties with Israel and, in many cases, the United States military. And this week, things escalated. On Tuesday, Columbia University called on police to shut down the encampment on their university lawn. 300 people were arrested. And at UCLA, about 200 pro-Israel counter-protesters attacked a pro-Palestinian encampment. On Thursday, UCLA administrators called on police to clear the encampment. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters are being detained. At the time of this taping, there have been arrests made at least 32 college campuses in the United States. So, Shaanth, Claire, when you talk to your fellow students, why is protesting on behalf of Palestinians important to them? Why is it worth the risk of arrest or physical violence?
Yeah, I think of all the protesters I've spoken with, they feel like it's a small price to pay to face arrest, to face suspension, to face even expulsion when there's people in Gaza who are losing their lives. People feel really passionately that this is wrong and that they have the unique opportunity as students at institutions with visibility to say something about it.
Yeah, I remember a couple moments walking up to folks on the perimeters of the encampment and asking why they felt talking about Palestinian experiences and Palestinian history and bringing light to causes of divestment was important. And a lot of them talked about their own personal experiences being people of color, whether they had families that experienced colonialism, whether they had families that had historical trauma that they see in relationship to the Palestinian experience. And then we also just got a lot of students who cared about the fact that they were at a university which has a large portfolio and the power to, in their eyes, make a lot of change.
Claire, you're at Columbia. Shaanth, you're at UCLA. Both of your campuses have been cleared. And the Columbia University president has since released a statement acknowledging the importance of protest and this cause, but also condemning the damage of any property. And UCLA's president offered sympathies for those caught in the violence and condemned the attack on the encampment. What are you hearing about what happens next?
I think that the response, bringing police, it's only really escalating the desire to keep protesting and to keep speaking out. Commencement is happening in a little over a week, so I expect that there will be some sort of demonstration at that. And so it's kind of hard to know when this will end. Classes are remote for the rest of the semester. Exams have been pushed back. So it certainly doesn't feel like the police being brought on was the end to the situation. It only feels kind of like the beginning of a new era or segment, of things being really up in the air.
So far, we have seen the encampment take a severe hit. The administration has already declared it unlawful. Because of that, police have entered. They have cleared a significant portion of the encampment, though there are several protesters who remain, as I can tell you right now.
In thinking about the coverage, I stayed up late on Tuesday night listening to Columbia University's student radio station, WKCR. And one thing that struck me was this statement that WKCR also put out this week. They said, quote, "These are our peers. These are the people we go to class with. We have the access to campus to provide nonstop coverage, to provide accurate voicing of what exactly is going on." And another journalist I admire, Tanvi Misra, noted that students are a group or community like any other. And just like it's vital to have people from marginalized backgrounds report on their communities, it's important for students to report on their communities as well. As student journalists, what do you think you are seeing that national journalists are missing?
Yeah, I think it's been so interesting to see, from the outside when these protests are painted as really violent or inciting hate speech or being led by outsiders, when that couldn't be further from the truth when you see these young people camped out, forming community, holding teach-ins, kind of having around-the-clock programming. And it's been interesting to see so much focus on the isolated incidents that have been negative on and off campus, while there hasn't been much eyes on these big counter-protests that are going on that are sometimes involving members of the Proud Boys who have been on the pro-Israel side. Plus, I think people forget that at the end of the day, these are students, often ages 19 to 21. They're also being taught in class that this is the time to express themselves, to fight back, learning in class about what protesting is.
And Shaanth, you were telling me about how you saw the violence that happened on your campus was being described as a quote unquote clash between pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel groups. What word would you use to describe the violence from that evening and why?
Yeah, I am thinking about the Google Doc on which all of us were debating how to say this. We knew from the beginning what had happened because we were there. In the sense of a clash, it sort of implies this lack of an asymmetry and that violence broke out. But the reality is a large group of counter-protesters descended upon the area, and very soon they started violently seizing the gates and harassing the people who were standing on the front lines of it.
I want to zoom out here because there's a deep history of student protests in the United States, even just looking at Columbia. On April 30th, 1968, Vietnam War and civil rights protesters occupied the campus's Hamilton Hall. Fast forward to this week, April 30th, 2024, pro-Palestinian protesters occupied the exact same building. Other protest movements have occupied that same building in 1972, 1985, 1992, 1996. Is this history on the minds of the students at these protests?
Oh, most definitely. The symbolism of the date being the same, April 30th, was lost on no one who led the occupation of Hamilton Hall. And yeah, I think these protesters see themselves as the current piece in a long history of this sort of action on campus. And I've heard from a lot of people, they're intrigued to see how history will remember them. There's all of this pushback right now, but the sense being maybe in 20 years, 30 years, this will be something that is taught about and taught about in a positive light, just as that 68 protest, at the time, I believe 700 people were arrested. The administrative response was very strong. And now it's something that Columbia is proud of, and talks about in a very positive way as a draw.
It's on the university website. I saw they had a commemorative web portal basically on the university website dedicated to 1968 and the uprisings that happened at Columbia.
Exactly,
it's very different than how it was perceived at the time,
Yeah, and I think that happens with a lot of civil rights leaders as well. People forget at the time that people were considered revolutionary for a reason, and I think that's something that's been on the minds of the protesters, how this will go down in history and how they'll be remembered, and I think that's been a real driver of their actions.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think one thing that I notice on my campus is we have faculty camped out with our students. We have a faculty for justice in Palestine. And
I saw that.
They're the ones delivering that history. Although students may not be in class, and we have had classes canceled, they're still in there learning and talking to people who have different experiences than them, different perspectives, and opening their minds that way. The parallels are super important to these protesters, but it's also the fact that those parallels happen because there's this generational continuity in the activism.
As we're winding down this conversation, I'm wondering This has been such a monumental week in America's history and the history of each of your universities. And I also imagine, not to speak for you, in each of your lives as well. What moment from this week can you not stop thinking about? What image do you think you'll remember for years to come?
You know, the night the police came in, we were aware that they were going to come. You know, we had some forewarning, and the protesters knew as well. And so a bunch of us student journalists were just kind of camped out in front of Hamilton Hall, and we were all just waiting. There was just these 25 to 30 young people, probably undergraduates, and they were linking arms, and they were just singing. And it wasn't the usual protest chants. It was just these beautiful songs. And the police came on campus in riot gear. It was right after the sun set, and I'll never forget that, seeing these students singing, a couple of them crying, and just kind of the disproportionality of the number of police who were coming to face them. It felt so incongruous. And then we were forced to leave, us and the legal observers and the medics, and this moment of walking away from those 25 people and wondering what was going to happen to them.
What an image, my gosh.
Yeah, the feeling of walking away is a really big one, especially because that night when the pro-Israel counter-protesters came and sort of seized upon the barricade and really attacked the pro-Palestinian camp, the sight of, for hours, people screaming, "Where are police? Where are law enforcement?" I did walk back that day, and I did experience a very unfortunate assault alongside 3 of my other student journalists. I don't think that that's something I will ever forget, and I think that that's what these moments of history can really tend to do.
Well, Claire, Shaanth, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and sharing with us and giving us a picture of what's happening in your communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
That was Claire Davenport, a student journalist at Columbia University, and Shaanth Nanguneri, a student journalist at the University of California, Los Angeles. I'm going to take a quick break, and when I get back, I'm getting into why an Israeli song is causing a big stir in Europe. I'll be right back.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Dignity Memorial. In life, you plan for many important things, like weddings, retirement, and your children's education. A celebration of life is really no different. Planning and paying for your celebration of life in advance protects your loved ones and gives you the peace of mind you deserve. It's truly one of the best gifts you can give your family. Dignity Memorial will help you take care of every detail with professionalism and compassion. For additional information, visit dignitymemorial.com.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. Here's a familiar situation. You have a question about your credit card. You call the number for help and can't get a hold of anyone. If only you had a Discover card. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, you heard that right, a real person. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. This message comes from NPR sponsor REI Co-op. REI has gear, clothing, classes, and advice for camping and glamping, biking and hiking, axing and snacksing, backpacking, and another outdoor thing that rhymes with backpacking. Visit your local REI Co-op or rei.com for the 1,000,001 ways you can opt outside.
My next big question is, what can a song contest tell us about Israel's relationship with Europe? This week, we're diving into Eurovision. For those who don't know, it's a yearly song competition that begins in just a few days. It's kind of like American Idol, but European.
It's a multinational competition with a collaborative mission. So much like the Olympics in a way.
Countries pick contestants to represent their nation, and these musicians get sent off to compete with one song that they think could be the best song in all of Europe. The prize? Basically just bragging rights.
243 points! We have a winner!
It started way before American Idol did. The Eurovision Song Contest has been around since the 1950s, and Americans have felt its impact even if we didn't realize it. Celine Dion? ABBA? Eurovision shot both of them to global stardom. But it does more than just launch stars. It's a battle of nations, which means even if it's just a song contest, there's gonna be a political undercurrent.
It's not just interesting for all the campy outfits and songs. It tells us a lot about how countries engage with one another and how countries want to be perceived.
That's Paul David Flood. He's a literal Eurovision scholar who is writing a PhD dissertation on it.
Who gets to be European and what does Europeanness look and sound like?
And this year, there are even more questions swirling around Eurovision, mainly about Israel's participation. Now, if you're confused, there are a few non-European countries that have participated in Eurovision. Australia, Armenia, Morocco, and Israel, which has sent musicians since 1973. But this year, there's a lot more debate around Israel's participation because of the conflict in Gaza, and it's gotten heated. So today, I'm talking with Paul about Israel's song and dance at Eurovision, and why Americans might want to pay attention. Paul, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Okay, so I know on a global level just how impactful and how huge Eurovision is. It easily surpasses the Super Bowl in terms of viewership, but I have to admit that I wasn't really aware of it until a few years ago.
Yeah.
I only became aware of it because a friend of mine who's a journalist was covering it, and she was talking about it, and I was like, girl, I don't know what you're talking about. And I Googled it on the slide. But that experience is not uncommon for an American. I saw a study that found that only 20% of Americans have even heard of Eurovision.
Yes.
Why do you think it might be important for us to pay attention this year?
I've been a fan of this thing since 2011. No one knew what it was at the time, but fast forward to 2024, I talk to people and I meet people and I'm like, oh, I study Eurovision. And they're like, oh, I know this song. I saw the Will Ferrell movie, right? And so it is becoming increasingly present in U.S. American culture, even if we aren't directly involved or impacted by it.
You know, there's a lot going on in the world this year. Give me a preview of all the tensions going into this year's competition. Particularly, what's the story of Israel's involvement in the contest this year?
Come about February, it's announced that Israel's song is titled October Rain.
Oh, yes. I heard about that.
Yes. So the song is initially titled October Rain. Some excerpts of the lyrics include they were all good children. The word flowers came up a lot, and flowers is IDF code for war casualties. And so there are a lot of blatant references. The sort of last line of the chorus says, I'm still wet from this October rain. The European Broadcasting Union, which is the EBU, that's the major organizer of the contest, was like, hey, you can't send this. This is too political. This is breaching our rules. And so Israel says, okay, and they try again with a song called Dance Forever. But the EBU also said that it was in breach of the rules against songs having political nature. So Israel doubles down and they're like, okay, we are sending October Rain or we're out. We have to send this song. Then in comes Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who basically says, no, Israel needs to be at Eurovision. We need to make these changes. We have to be there because we have to present Israel in a positive light to an audience of 100 million viewers around the globe.
Just for understanding on my part, how common is it for a president to get directly involved in a Eurovision decision or deliberation?
Very rare.
Okay.
This is pretty unprecedented.
Okay. And then what happens?
And then they changed the lyrics. So October Rain is now called Hurricane.
I'm still broken from this hurricane.
And the EBU approves the song. So Hurricane is now Israel's official entry for the 2024 Eurovision Song Contest.
I wonder, what does Israel get out of participating in Eurovision?
The contest has grown in its international audience. And so Israel then gets to present themselves in the light that they want to be seen in through songs, and particularly alongside European nations in this contest that effectively upholds Western social and political values.
The way you're talking about it kind of reminds me of the Olympics. Like, it's about sports, but it's like not just about sports.
Exactly.
So Eurovision bills itself as non-political, and yet countries try to use the song contest to share political songs. From what I understand, Israel's not the first to do this.
Absolutely. One of my favorite examples is from 2009, when the contest was held in Moscow, Russia, after Russia had their first victory in 2008. Also in 2008, Russia is at war with Georgia, a former Soviet state in the Caucasus regions.
Right.
So the song that they chose to represent Georgia in the 2009 contest in Moscow, Russia, is a song by a group called Stefan and 3G, which is titled "We Don't Want to Put In."
Oh, like put in Putin.
Yes.
How did that go over?
Well, it's a disco song, so it kind of slaps.
Some disco tonight, boogie with you.
But the EBU was like, you cannot send this. This is very, very clearly a slight against Russia, against Vladimir Putin. And Georgia did not budge, so they ended up withdrawing ultimately.
So there is a precedent for Israel to be told to change its song because it's too spicy, but there's also precedent for countries to be straight up barred from entering the contest because of their global conflicts, like when Russia was banned a few years ago after they invaded Ukraine in 2022. Can you lay that out?
Yeah. At the time, there were lots of calls for Russia to be removed from the contest. The EBU was like, no, like, we're not going to remove Russia. This is an apolitical event, right? And then national broadcasters, other participating broadcasters, begin threatening to pull out of the contest if Russia were to remain in the 2022 contest. So the EBU made a statement saying that there would be no Russian act at the 2022 Eurovision Song Contest. Quote, "The decision reflects concern that, in light of the unprecedented crisis in Ukraine, the inclusion of a Russian entry in this year's contest would bring the competition into disrepute," end quote. The EBU is concerned about bringing the contest into disrepute by having it be directly engaged with ongoing geopolitical events.
Interesting.
So fast forward to 2024. Russia-Ukraine is very different from Israel-Palestine. These two conflicts are not the same, nor should they be treated the same. But that said, a lot of fans are comparing EBU's lack of banning Israel to the EBU's banning Russia in 2022. This is largely because of how much media attention there is on this year's contest because of Israel's participation, the drama regarding the song selection, and also the fact that the BDS movement officially called for a boycott of the contest.
BDS, meaning the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement.
And specifically, not just the Israeli song, but the contest as a whole. Tune out for the whole thing. With the argument that by allowing Israel to participate, the EBU and its viewers are complicit in Israel's use of Eurovision as what scholars have argued is a pinkwashing tool. A lot of fans are confused and frustrated because they recognize this as a double standard.
Right. There are open letters from artists of different nations calling it exactly that, a double standard, after Israel has killed tens of thousands of people in its attacks in Gaza. And protests are already starting in this year's host city of Malmö, Sweden.
And to have banned Russia in the past for its ground invasion of Ukraine and its bombardment campaign there, but then to allow Israel to participate, which is not even a member of Europe, for what?
I mean, of course, there are also many people who support Israel's involvement and are circulating letters affirming the EBU's decision to keep it in. You know, one of those letters was signed by celebrities like Helen Mirren and Scooter Braun. Basically, they're saying that Israel absolutely has a place in a contest that's supposed to be apolitical and about unity. But I don't know, it's interesting to me. I imagine one of the differences between these situations is that Russia could be seen as more immediately threatening to the rest of Europe. You know, it's actively invading Ukraine. It also has like a long adversarial history with the former Soviet bloc, among other countries in Europe. There's a past and a present threat there, whereas Israel as a nation It doesn't have the same history of conflict within Europe. But I also see how, because of the different histories of conflict, there could be a different view of who should be allowed to compete within the realm of Eurovision.
Absolutely. I mean, Russia has long historically been positioned as a threat to the West, to Western economy, Western politics, Western society, whereas Israel was established as effectively an ally to the West, if not just straight up part of the West. And so that plays out. These statements against Russia's participation from national broadcasters, we're not getting that same pressure against Israel. And so because there isn't that pressure from other participating national broadcasters, the EBU is less likely to act in the same way that they did with Russia.
So I wonder, what does Israel's participation in this year's Eurovision Song Contest say about how Europe views Israel right now?
It's hard to say, I think, because, governments and publics can have very different opinions on things. It's not standard across the board, and it can differ from country to country. For example, Iceland is very pro-Palestine to the extent where they actually almost sent a Palestinian to represent them in the contest this year.
Wow.
And because of that, for a while, Iceland was number one in the betting odds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because people figured that if Iceland sends a Palestinian, they're probably going to get the same treatment as Ukraine did in 2022, with massive, massive support from the public televote, ultimately winning the contest. So people were thinking that the same thing would happen for Iceland if they sent the Palestinian singer Bashar Murad.
'Cause I'm going to the wild, wild west, where the only rest is for the wicked, where even if you do your best.
Bashar Murad was ultimately not chosen. Iceland then plummeted in the betting odds.
We've been talking a lot about the geopolitics of all this, but what aspect of this is just entertainment?
As I mentioned before, it's geopolitical theater with an emphasis on theater, because Eurovision has this reputation for being gimmicky and campy, but in such a way that draws people's attention to the ways in which countries are presenting themselves, actively participating in and responding to geopolitical events.
Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. This was so informative. I learned so much.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Thanks again to PhD candidate Paul David Flood. And one more thing to add here. After we talked to Paul, Eurovision organizers shared a rule that only the flags of participating countries, as well as pride flags, can be brought to the competition this year, which means no Palestinian flags allowed. Now, whether participants and the audience adhere to that, we'll just have to wait and see. The Eurovision Song Competition begins on Tuesday, May 7th. I'm going to take a quick break, and when I get back, I've got some good friends in the hot seat for a little game inspired by Zendaya, bisexuality, and the movie everyone is obsessed with. I'll be right back.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Betterment, an automated investing and savings app. CEO Sarah Levy shares why Betterment believes cash can be a strategic choice.
There are times when the market is volatile, when customers are a little nervous about investing. We came to understand that there was an opportunity to introduce cash as part of an investing strategy and to give back yields to the customer.
Learn more about high-yield cash accounts at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed. Cash reserve offered through Betterment LLC and Betterment Securities. Betterment is not a bank. This message comes from NPR sponsor Progressive Insurance, where drivers who switch could save hundreds on car insurance. Get your quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. This message comes from NPR sponsor Homes.com. When you're home shopping as a parent, you have lots of questions about local schools. That's why each listing on Homes.com includes extensive reports on local schools, including photos, parent reviews, student-teacher ratio, school rankings, and more. The information is from multiple trusted sources and curated by a dedicated in-house research team. It's also you can make the right decision for your family. Homes.com. We've done your homework.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Progressive. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit their website to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies so you can compare. Then just choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
All right. We're going to play a little game I like to call, But Did You Know? And today, I've got the hosts of Pop Culture Happy Hour with me, Linda Holmes and Stephen Thompson. Say hi, y'all.
Hello.
Hi, Brittany.
So happy to have you both here.
Oh.
I'm so glad. All right. This is how the game works.
All right.
I'm going to share a story that's been making headlines this week. And as I give you some background on the story, I'll also ask you trivia related to it. But don't worry, it's all multiple choice. And the first one to blurt out the right answer gets a point. Person with the most points wins, and their prize is, as always, bragging rights. Now, this week's game is all about Zendaya's bisexual nail-biter challengers. Have either of you seen it?
We have.
We've both seen it. We saw it together.
So since you've both seen the film, you know that Challengers is all about tennis. There's a lot of debate, believe it or not, about whether a tennis ball is green or yellow. But one thing we do know is that before tennis was broadcast on television, the ball used to be which of these colors? Is it A, white, B, orange, or C, red?
Orange.
We got Linda saying orange, and Stephen, what say you?
I'm going to say red.
All right, Stephen said C, red. You were both wrong.
Linda and I are very evenly matched.
Yeah. Well, this is how our friendship has survived for 20 years, is that we tend to both be wrong most of the time.
That's good. Mm-hmm. Even though neither of you got a point this round, I'll give you a little prize in the form of a little fun fact. Tennis balls used to be either white or black. But once the sport started being televised, the league had to change the color because white or black was too hard for viewers at home to see.
Yeah.
You don't know that they were never orange, Brittany.
You know what? You're right. That wasn't the question, but you raise a very good a very good point, Linda.
Can you prove
there was never an orange tennis ball? I don't think so.
Well, okay. So no one picked up a point this first round, but maybe it'll happen in the second round, okay? On to our next Challengers-inspired trivia question. A real-life tennis analyst and U.S. Open winning coach taught the leads of the movie all
Brad Gilbert.
About tennis.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly. His name is Brad Gilbert.
I just saw that Coco Gauff's coach trained Zendaya. So my answer would have been D, Coco Gauff's coach.
Well, let's keep going. So his name is Brad Gilbert, and he sat in the stands at Pepperdine University with Zendaya to teach her all about the sport. Which of these players is he currently the coach of?
Coco Gauff!
I mean, I guess there's no real way around this. I didn't get to give you answers A or C, but the correct answer is B, Coco Gauff.
Wow, who would have thunk it?
Coco became the first teenager to win the U.S. Open last year since Serena Williams won it back in 1999. Brad Gilbert said training Zendaya prepared him to train Coco, which I'm like, I need a follow-up to that because I'm like, what did you mean by that? What does that mean? What does that mean? But I wonder, did you all think Zendaya was a believable tennis player? Like was she giving Coco Gauff on screen for y'all?
I mean, I think she was giving Zendaya. And I think that Zendaya performance is fantastic. Whether she's evoking any specific tennis player never entered my mind as somebody who's a pretty casual tennis fan.
Yeah, I thought she was a very believable, very intense athlete. And that's what I bought. And I think this will be and should be her Oscar nomination.
Oh, okay.
Wow. That's bold. For a movie that came out in April, that's bold.
I know. Linda, she's getting out ahead of it. How about that? She's getting out ahead of it.
I'm nothing but bold today.
Nothing but bold today. All right. Well, I'm hoping that boldness will serve you in our third and final question. Because to recap the score, Linda, you are still at 0 points, and Stephen, you are currently at 1 point. And in a situation like this, where we got 1 point on the board for one player, and we have one last question, this is going to be a winner takes all. This is going to be a winner takes all.
Oh, so the first questions were completely irrelevant.
No, they weren't completely irrelevant, but this one admittedly is a little trickier. And also, I also just like the idea of someone winning. So that's what's going to happen. I've changed the rules.
All right.
Okay, so this is our final question. Winner takes all.
Wow, okay.
As we know, this movie has got some hot and steamy love scenes. I'm not going to get too into that. However, the word love is also used a lot on the tennis court. You know, like when the announcer says like 3-love. Love in this context means 3-0, right? But what's the origin of that? Using love to mean 0 in tennis. Is it A, from players playing tennis for the love of the sport? Is it B, from the French word for egg, l'œuf, which, and an egg being shaped like a 0? Or is it C, from who knows where? We have no idea why this even started happening.
Well, I've always heard it was the egg, but I have a feeling that it's not the egg. But I have always heard it was the egg, so I'm just going to say egg one more time.
Okay, so Linda's saying B, egg.
So Linda has seemed very confident this entire time that it's about the egg. I have no choice, in the interest of a clean victory or defeat, to guess that it is C, nobody knows.
Wow, this is stunning, actually.
It's A, right?
Steven, the answer is C. We have no idea. Nobody actually knows.
I mean, you can't really say we don't know. I know, clearly. You can tell I knew.
Allow me to continue. Nobody actually knows the confirmed origin. This is a term, love, as it's been used in tennis since the late 1800s, but nobody knows where it came from. The love of the game theory and also the egg theory are both theories tossed around, but are not proven to be the actual origin. So, Steven, you have won today's round of But Did You Know? Congrats to Steven on your win.
Congratulations, Steven. Our friendship is over.
Wow. You know what? Worth it. Worth it.
Oh my gosh. Well, Linda and Steven, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a blast and a half.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you, Brittany, even when I lose.
That was NPR's Linda Holmes and Stephen Thompson. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Plachek.
Engineering support came from Stu Rushfield. We had fact-checking help from
Candace Bo Kortkamp.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message is brought to you by NPR sponsor Lisa in collaboration with West Elm. Discover the new natural hybrid mattress, expertly crafted from natural latex and certified safe foams, designed with your health and the planet in mind. Visit leesa.com to learn more.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sell without needing to code or design. Just bring your best ideas and Shopify will help you open up shop. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/NPR.
Is it possible to engineer our way out of the climate crisis? Some entrepreneurs want to shoot particles into the stratosphere to combat global warming. Experts say regulations on this technology aren't keeping up. The world of solar geoengineering on the latest episode of The Sunday Story from NPR's Up First podcast.